Well, I failed and I did not post a failure Friday episode yesterday, which was Friday. Today is Saturday. But the good news is this whole episode is about failure. And so I'm going to try to embody what I'm about to talk about and take this failure, learn from it, and try to do better moving forward. But what happened this week, busy week, we all have been there. A little bit of a lingering cold, something going around. You can probably hear it in my voice and my nose a little bit right now. But anyways, kind of coming out of that elderberry syrup, that's the solution. I feel like every time I have a lingering cold, I go and buy some elderberry syrup and I start to feel so much better. So if you are an elderberry company listening to this and you want to support me, I will definitely support you. I would love to push out elderberry products. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's all placebo. If there's any doctors or anyone listening to this and you have opinions on elderberry, maybe it's all a big marketing scheme. I don't know. Either way, I am feeling much better and ready to do this failure, or you could say fail more Friday, failure Friday, fail more Friday. I don't know. Either way, we are talking about failures and how you should think about it, how you should reframe it, and how you can respond to it. I want to talk about the real, the deterrent from failure. One of the things that scares us from failure, keeps us away from taking risks, is this desire for comfort, which is very human, very normal, but also can hold us back in many different ways. I want to talk about how the risk of failure is very real, and it's not something that should be necessarily sugar-coated. There are very real risks when you take big swings and you miss and you fail. So that is a real part of it that needs to be considered. And then I kind of want to end with how risk is necessary, and a big part of taking a risk is that willingness to fail. So before we dive into all of that, as always, please subscribe to Design More, Despair Less on YouTube. My goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And it's already halfway through October. So we've got a ways to go. So please, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do and send it to any friends or family that you think would find it interesting. You can also find me on X as well as on Instagram. Okay, now that that is out of the way, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of this episode. And the first thing I want to talk about when discussing this topic of failure is comfort. And I think this is something talked about a lot. You hear about the comfort crisis and how, we live in a time where comfort is very accessible. And if you work hard, you put in the time, you pay attention to the details, you do things the right way, it's very easy to maintain that comfort. It's easy to have a nice home, keep it warm, keep the power on, and you can stay comfortable. I think comfort is actually one of the biggest things that keeps us from taking risks, because risks involve the potential to fail, and the potential to fail, or failure itself, is very, very uncomfortable. Let's be honest. None of us like to fail. And I think a big part of this goes back to school. For me, I see a lot if I look back at my history coming up through school, and how in no way would I blame teachers. I had incredible teachers, awesome parents, I had all the opportunity in the world. But I think just the way a lot of our current programs and structure of school works is it kind of incentivizes you not to take risks. If you fail, it's difficult, right? Because you want kids to study, you want them to work hard, you want them to have the possibility of failing and kind of have that motivate them to do well on tests, to write good papers, yada, yada, yada. But you also have a lot of pressure to not take risks, because if you take a risk, it could go wrong. And if you fail, you get a bad grade. And if you get a bad grade, it's kind of like on your permanent record in a way. Especially, I think this feels a lot more real for students in high school, where all you hear about is getting into college and how expensive college is. And so you need to get scholarships. And to get scholarships, you have to have really good grades. And to have really good grades, you really can't ever fail a test. Maybe you can fail an assignment here or there, but even that just feels like there's so much pressure on it. And so you don't really want to take the risk. You just want to know exactly what you have to do to get that good grade, and you do it. And there's value in that. You still do learn about the content. You still learn how to be disciplined, but it kind of builds this fear of failure, because when you fail, if you potentially fail, if you fail that exam, if you fail that midterm, you feel this pressure of your whole future going down the drain. You're not going to be able to get into that school. You're not going to be able to get that big scholarship that you need to go to the school you want to. And so it builds, at least for me, it kind of built this pattern of, I'm going to do well, but I'm never going to push myself too far that I might fail. I'm never going to take too big of a risk on this assignment, because if I fail, that isn't worth the risk. There's no real reward to taking a big risk and being creative and trying something new, because you're probably just going to get an A, but this other person who just kind of hit all the bare minimum requirements also got an A. And if you take this risk and you don't pass, or you don't get that good grade, it's going to have an impact, a lasting impact on your future. So I don't really know what the solution for that is, other than perhaps things outside of school are maybe the best way to address that. I think sports, honestly, are a great way. I failed a lot in sports, lost a lot of games. And I think that's a place where you can learn how to deal with that failure, that there's always a way to bounce back. And you can take risks, and the risks often have a reward in a sports setting. So I think there are ways to combat this, but it's definitely something that I felt a lot growing up. And looking back, it kind of built this perfectionist mentality, which was actually more of a fear of failure, a fear of embarrassment, a fear of people not looking at me as the smart kid, or whatever the case might be. So going back to this idea of comfort, for me, that was comfortable. If I knew I was getting good grades, I knew I was going to get into college, I still was keeping up this facade, or this image of being smart and good at school and going to be successful. And so that gave me comfort, but also prevented me from taking risks. And I think that is true of a lot of us. And I don't want to sugarcoat this idea of, you just need to fail more and, whatever, like just take big swings and you don't overthink it, just do the thing. I definitely am not saying that. You do want to fail, but you want to fail intelligently, because there is definitely risk inherent to failure. There's depending on how big of a failure you have, whether that is starting a new company, whether that is investing a lot of money in certain stocks, whatever you are attempting to pursue and take a risk with, if you fail, that could mean losing a lot of money. That could mean filing for bankruptcy. That could mean having to move back in with your parents, or having to sleep on somebody's couch for a couple months or a year. They're very real risks. And especially if you're somebody with a family, with kids, then those risks are all multiplied, because now it's not even you. Maybe you have to go through some discomfort, but now you're also forcing that discomfort onto all these people that you're responsible for, that you care about. So I don't want to downplay the real risk of failure. Although I believe failure and taking risks is very necessary, the impacts of it shouldn't be taken lightly. And that's why I've been saying for a while, you need to fail, but fail intelligently. Make sure you understand what you're trying to achieve. Make sure you understand what you're designing, what you're creating, the risk you're taking, the company you're investing in, if that's what you're doing, and make sure the risk is well calculated. That even if you do fail, you can learn from that. Because if you just, let's say I just want to test something, so I'm just gonna CAD something up real quick in software and throw it together, and if it fails, whatever. It's fine. That could be kind of fun. That could be more of a hobby. But if you're not methodically going through and strategically thinking through, okay, I'm going to design it this specific way so I can test this specific thing and see how it fails, and then I can iterate and improve on that and get better and better over time. You could think of this with investing. If you're looking at the stock market, you're looking at different companies. Maybe you're looking at specific metrics for those companies and you're investing based off those. That's something then, at least you have a basis. You have something that you're starting from and that you can track. And if it fails, you can look back at why you invested in that company, adjust a few of the parameters, and then improve. And hopefully, ideally, get better and better over time. But if you just hear, oh, this new startup just, IPO'd, and I'm just going to put a bunch of money into it, and let's just hope it does. I'm going to take a risk and hope it does well. If you don't even know the technology that company is working on, how do you expect, that's a bad risk to take, right? You're not going to learn anything, and odds are you're going to lose a bunch of money. So the risk is real. Just because failure is necessary, it does not mean that, it's going to be easy. Does not mean you're not going to feel discomfort. It doesn't mean you're not going to have real hardship. That is something that is going to be part of it, but it's still something that you need to think through, and that I think in whatever way makes sense for you, you need to take. You need to take risks in life. It also just brings a little bit of adventure and gives you, maybe just a little bit more of that energy, a little bit more of that little lights of fire, inside of you, under your feet, gets you moving, gets you, motivated, helps you stay disciplined, whatever the case might be. So in this scenario, in this episode, talking about failure, it is very much related to avoiding comfort, but avoiding discomfort, liking that idea of comfort, but realizing that that is not where you're going to grow. You need to understand how and where to take these risks. Make sure you know what the impacts of those risks are, but understand that those risks are necessary often in life to be successful. Those risks are often necessary or even required to get to where you want to go, to create a product that impacts the world, to create a product that changes the world for the better, to create a life that you and your family love and enjoy and feel successful and fulfilled. You have to take a risk almost every time. There's always something unknown. You're never going to know exactly the next step. You're never going to know exactly how things are going to turn out, but you have to be willing to take that step. So I basically want to kind of bring this together with essentially 3 core takeaways. The first one is understand and quantify your risk tolerance. So we all have different risk tolerances. We all have different life scenarios. We all have different responsibilities, people we're caring for, people that rely on us. And so if you are thinking it's time, or you just want to start implementing and taking more risks in your life, I think the first step is to understand your risk tolerance. What realistically can you lose? How much money do you want to invest in maybe your own startup? How much money do you want to invest in the stock market? And how much of that money can you realistically lose? Maybe you want to take a risk of starting your own business and you need to understand, okay, how much of my time can I realistically put into this thing and sacrifice putting into my family, into my wife, my husband, my kids. And so these are the sorts of real life things that you need to take into account. How much money do I want to put into this business? And maybe I can't make my house payments. Maybe we, lose a mortgage and maybe we have to rent for a while. Maybe we have to move back in with our parents. Is that a risk that you're willing to take? So that's the first step, is to understand and to actually quantify what your risk tolerance is, whether that's in money, whether that's in time, whether that's in sleep, and you might have to give up a lot of sleep. That could be also have health impacts. There's all of these different factors that come into play. Number 2, I would say, is start by failing small first and kind of build up that failure callus. Kind of understand that, failure isn't fatal most of the time, unless you're designing airplanes, in which case, make sure you're failing in testing, not on the final design. I very much appreciate that as someone who enjoys flying. So start small. Start taking risks in smaller ways so that you can see, basically just kind of build up this endurance, build up this confidence in yourself that if you do fail, you're going to learn from it, you're going to improve, and you're going to do better the next time. And I think if you start doing that in small ways, you start building up this momentum, which then allows you to take bigger risks and have the confidence that, hey, even if this does fail, I understand what I put into it. I understand what I want to learn out of it. And so if it fails, I'm going to improve. I know the metrics I'm looking at. I'm going to improve those next time. I'm going to get better and better over time. So even though this is a step back, over time, I will be moving forward. And then number 3, take the time to figure out for you what is actually worth failing for, right? So maybe if it's you have this idea of some startup where you're going to be selling, what did I see on Parks and Rec the other day? Selling cleaning products to dry cleaners. That might be a great way to make money, but if it's a high risk idea that you're having to invest a lot of time, money, effort, health, is that actually something that you are willing to fail for? And so this really goes back to your purpose. What's driving you? What is it in the morning that when you don't want to get out of bed, you're really tired, you have a cold, what is it that's going to drive you to be like, you know what? This is worth it. I'm going to go for it, pushing through on to the next thing. And I think that takes time to figure out. I think for many of us, that could be years and years. You could be 40, 50 before you really find that thing that, like, all right, this is the thing. This is worth it. The impacts of this, the potential benefits of this are worth the failure. They're worth everything crashing and burning. And so that takes time, takes a lot of introspection, journaling, writing, conversations with friends, with mentors, all these different people to figure those things out. So that's essentially what I wanted to talk about for this Failure Friday that's coming out on a Saturday, which is a failure on my part, and I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to do better. I'm going to take this episode, my own words to heart. Hopefully, this saying I have in the background over here, right there, failure is a risk worth taking. I took a risk. Well, I don't know if I took a risk. I just didn't get to it this week. But it's coming out on a Saturday. Hopefully you have more time to listen to it today. But that's it. As always, please subscribe to Design More, Despair Less on YouTube. As I said, I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And so that would really help the channel out. That's it. I hope you have a great, restful weekend. And this episode kind of helps catapult you into the next week. As always, remember, design more, despair less, and thank you so much for watching.